You know, this is El Man, and I'm here on It Came From the Radio with Mark Torres. I think he created this radio show similar to what you're listening to now, or maybe it's the same. It Came From the Radio. Welcome, Mark Torres.
Hello, this is a very meta interview. Yes, you're listening to It Came From Radio, being interviewed by someone on It Came From Radio with someone from It Came From Radio.
Yeah. So, okay, first question. You started this radio show 17, 18, 19 years ago?
It's 19 years ago. We're going to hit our 20th anniversary next, 2023 on February, I think 14th or something like that, around that time. We started the show. The only reason I know is because the first show we discussed the new Daredevil movie that was coming out with Ben Affleck. So that's how I'm able to get the date. So that was 2003.
Okay, so now we're in 2022, and who knows how long this interview is going to live on the internet. Maybe someone is listening to this in 2063, and I'll just give you a reference that in 2022, everyone and their mother has a podcast, and a lot of these people do shows about nothing. I'll go on their shows and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to freestyle it, we're just going to talk, and it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely disgusting. But you on this show, you structure the show, you have topics every week, you have the news every week, there's always something going on. So my question to you is, why did you make this show 19-ish years ago? Like, did you have something specific to talk about? Or did you just want to talk about nothing like all these other idiots I listen to?
So you want the long version or the short version?
I want whatever version you want on the radio. This is technically your show.
All right. So, I think it was more than 20 years ago. I was driving from the cemetery, and I've always wanted to be in comic books, always. Even as a kid, I never wanted to do anything else but do comics. And I was driving from the cemetery, and I heard on the radio, hey, if you have a passion or interest for something and you want to interview people in your field, call us up and you get your own radio show. Now, this was before internet was a big deal.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, get your own radio show, call these people up. So I reached out to WGBB, which was Long Island's oldest radio station, which it still is.
Yeah.
And I talked it over with the lady, and she's like, yeah, you can have your own show and you can talk to networking and learn about comics and stuff. And I was like, wow, this might be my in to get my own comic book published. Right. That was my original idea. So I was working at Blockbuster at the time. So I sat with my coworkers and we worked it out how we were going to do the show. It was going to be a half-hour show. And at the time, The View was just being big. It was just coming into play.
Okay.
And I was like, let's be like that. So I saw The View, and they had like different people, each had their own background.
And now, for reference, don't be like The View. It's so annoying, but back then probably. Go on.
Well, it was a new hip thing. The View it was a new format to have different people talking about different topics. Yeah, so that was the idea behind it. So that was what we did, and I got myself, my ex-girlfriend at the time. She's my current girlfriend back then, my ex now. I got a friend of mine who I had met in a comic book school that I went to after I graduated from high school. He was working at Wizard Entertainment at the time. And then I had another friend who was like an older guy, and he knew a lot about the old stuff of comics. So I was like, all right, I got my old guy, I got the guy who knows stuff on the inside. I have a female who doesn't know anything about comics and stuff, which ironically, her name was also Jennifer.
Right.
And then I had me. So I was the host, and everybody gets a name, and that's how we started doing the show. Half-hour show. We broke it up into segments. It went by really fast. Half-hour goes super, super fast. And then we got to an hour, and then we started growing and expanding. And then we just kind of kept on going all these years later.
Okay, so now you actually have done your own comic books. Now, what do I want to talk about first? All right, let's talk about Designated. So you have this Designated, the Kickstarter, I believe, goes live on 7/30, July 30th. And
Correct.
It's called Designated, and it's about aliens and teens caught in between two warring alien tribes, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't read it because it's not out yet.
So basically, this comic book is 30 years in the making.
Holy.
Like I said, I always wanted to be in comic books, and I wanted to make my own comic book back then. And as I mentioned, the comic book school with my former co-host, um, I was in the school, and at the time I had wanted to be a comic book artist. And what I learned, the biggest thing I learned at the comic book school is that I'm a better writer than I am an artist. And that the writer is the one that controls the story, not the artist. Because back in the 90s, you always thought the artist is the one that draws the stories, they do everything. But no, they're just told what to draw. And then they draw. So it's like, do you want to be like, what was it? I always want to direct, I always want to produce, as the actors world go. Because you think the actors gets to do all this stuff, but no, they're just reading the lines of dialogue that they're given, as opposed to creating the character and making all that stuff yourself. So like, I want to make my own comic book. And at the time they said it would just cost $2,000. And in 2000, in year 1995 or 6, $2,000 is a lot of money.
Right.
It's not so much now, but it's a little more to make a comic book now than it was back then. So I tried to do it, couldn't do it, try to do it again. Circumstances happen, bad luck happens, all this kind of stuff happens. And that's when the radio show came the opportunity. I'm like, oh, okay, let's do that. Radio came along. And now, after all these years, I finally get to make this book through Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter is only so big now because of the pandemic. So thanks to a global pandemic, I'm able to make an attempt, a final attempt to get this book out, which is about warring races, alien races. Remember, I wrote this back in the 90s, so you have to kind of have that mentality as how things were back then in the 90s, if you may remember. I don't know. Everything was extreme and to the max and over the top and overdrawn. So my idea was to make a comic book to swap that, to have minimalistic powers, minimalistic stories that make sense, because I've always liked things that make sense.
Okay.
So we have two warring alien races. They're fighting over a power source, finds their way to Earth, and through a unique set of circumstances, the humans that are involved get powers from the power source.
Gotcha. Now, do you think aliens exist? Because in the past couple months, there's been disclosures, and it could, and there's different theories that maybe they're saying there's aliens for more of a distraction. Who knows? There's a lot of distrust now. Do you think there's really aliens? I'm supposed to be part alien, according to various psychics, by the way, part alien, not full alien, and from my dad's side. They always say it's from my dad's side.
We're in a situation where the world is so crazy right now that the revelation, and it was in what was that show? 60 Minutes, a reputable news source, that there's aliens. It was on there. They had an expose on there. Nobody cares. This is how crazy the world is right now.
Yeah. I mean,
it was just swept under the rug.
Oh, I have two questions. So speaking of, I mean, when you have monkeypox or aliens, it's like, so number one, how big of a threat, 10 being like the world is ending, 0 being a lie, how big of a threat is monkeypox, 1 to 10?
Based on what I've heard, I'm going to say we're looking at a 7 or 8.
Really? You think it's a real threat?
That's like I said, based on what I've heard, and not through any mainstream media. It's talking to people and listening to stuff. I think it's gonna be bad.
Interesting. Okay. I was going to ask you what your favorite warmonger, leader is, Fauci or Cuomo, but we'll gloss over that. That's just,
as a New Yorker, we're supposed to hate Cuomo. That's like the law. I think that's one of the things.
A lot of women love Cuomo.
Well, I'm not a woman.
True. Maybe you have to be a woman to love Cuomo, because a lot of women are like, he's so great. Look what he's doing for us. But back to you. So you created a character, Sunburst, which we talked about bringing to life. And when there's more cons, we can bring it to life, because you need real life to be open to bring something to life. How did you create Sunburst? She has bright orangish hair. Like, who is she? What are her superpowers? What's so great about this Sunburst?
Well, the cheat answer is that I created her, so that makes her obviously great. But Sunburst was also created. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Sunburst was created back at the comic book school. I was just doodling around. I was drawing something, and it just came to me of her look, and she was based off of 2 things. There was the little series called the Animaniacs, which they brought back now on Hulu. And there was a character called Hello Nurse. And one of her things was that she had this weird hair that just kind of flowed. And at the same time, Little Mermaid had came out. So one of the most important things was that I wanted her to have like flowy, kind of orangey red, fiery hair. And that led me to think, what kind of powers would she have? Which is a fire-based powers. And when you're working in comic books, you kind of just have like a list of powers and what they are. So you have ice-based powers, things you make cold. You have superpowers, meaning that you have you can fly around, you can punch
Mhm.
stuff really strong. There's different types. So a fire-based character, which is she can shoot fire, she can fly, she can cause things to heat up or take away heat, that kind of stuff.
If you were to make another superhero character today, actually today, because some people would argue that every day we are different people with different thoughts. Maybe every hour we can shift, but I feel a little different every day. What type of superhero character would you create today? And what type of villain would you create today?
That's a hard one
Yeah.
because I don't think I would make superheroes anymore. I've made so many back then that haven't been used. Now it's more along the lines of what kind of stories to tell. So I would think a person who has the ability to, we've heard about the multiverse, that's the new thing.
Yes.
And it's been hinted at throughout the years on various TV shows. But one of the things I have is that a guy has the ability to swap his place with his other self, that he can reach out in his mind to a different version of himself and swap places with them with no one knowing. And that's something that actually happens to people, which is why people misremember things, and which is why you have that the Mandela effect, which is you think something, a lot of people remember something a certain way, and then you look it up and that's not how it was.
Mhm.
The biggest example I could think of would be the Berenstain Bears. How do
Yeah.
you spell
Yeah.
it? So if you're living in one world and you swap with the other world, you wouldn't know because everything's exactly the same except for that one thing. So the guy's power is to be able to do that at will, to swap with his other self.
Okay. That's
As for
interesting.
villains, oof. I don't think we. What's the saying? The villain doesn't think he's the villain, so that guy could actually be the villain. Because if you think about it, if you're having a great life, and then all of a sudden you get swapped with this guy having a sucky life, he's the villain of their own story. So I think you can be the villain and the hero at the same time.
Very interesting, very deep. Yeah, I've heard that before that people don't know that the villains don't know they're villains, but I
The
don't
best
know.
villains don't know they're villains.
The what? The what
The
villains?
best villains
The
don't know they're
best
villains.
villains.
Because if you have like a villain who's like a cartoon character who's
Mhm.
over the top, that's not a very realistic portrayal of a villain.
Right, okay.
Even the most evil person out there in the world right now, it's not saying, "Oh, I'm gonna get them." No, they're only caring about themselves and their world, and they just
Mm.
are inconsiderate or ignorant to the other people. It's not even a "I'm gonna get you." It's not that type of thing.
Yeah, you're right. That's like kind of like I've had this conversation, I've had people say to me, "Oh, I would never do anything to you, you're so great." Da, da, da. And it's like, yeah, but this is the problem. And this is what's so disappointing about life is that most of the people that have screwed me over, it's like they didn't mean to. It's
Mhm.
just, it was an oversight or it's an area where they lacked and they ended up being the villain in my life because they're so insecure or disorganized and they dropped the ball and then they ruined my life. It's not like they meant to. So
Mhm.
yeah, okay. All right. I had a question about that because I heard. So okay. So now we're almost at the end. We got about 5 minutes max. Now, if you weren't involved in the radio show, which must take up, okay, first I want to know how many hours a week this radio show takes up. And if you weren't doing the radio show and you weren't involved in comics and neither existed, how would you spend your time?
Oof. Let's see. I think it takes about, I'll say 3 days out of the week
Wow, three full
overall.
days, like 10
Yeah.
hours, 10 hours a day, 5 hours a day.
Yeah, like if you take 3 days out of the week and then stretch it out over the week, that's how long it takes. Because
Wow.
I listened to the show at least 3 times, so that's 3 hours right there.
Wow.
Then there's the posting and the social media stuff, and the uploading and the editing and the discussions, all that stuff, and they're doing the news. It usually takes me 2 days to do the news,
Oh my
but
God.
then I'm not fully dedicated, so you kind of spread it out throughout the week. Um, if there was no radio show and no comics, I think I would die.
You think you would
I
die?
Yeah, because like that's all I know. That, like I said, when I was a kid, that's all I ever wanted to do. There wasn't any other job. I didn't want to be an astronaut. I didn't want to be a fireman, a policeman. I didn't want to do anything else but work in comics. So if that didn't exist, I'd be a blub.
Let's say you have to pick something today to do something. You have to leave your house. You have to do something. What would you do today? You have to. You're being forced to, life or death.
I'd probably just die.
Wow.
But we'll go with what I did for 20 years. I did retail.
Okay.
Apparently, I'm very good at retail, despite the fact that I don't like retail and I hate people.
Right, right. You hate people. Okay, so now we know that what have you seen? Because you've interviewed countless comic book creators, artists, anchors. What have you seen that makes a successful comic book? And there's two genres of success. There's one, people love it and they're well received and they light up people's lives. That's one version of success. What goes into that? What factors? And number two, what creates a monetary, a monetized success?
Well, if I knew the second answer, then I would be rolling around in the dough right now. So I don't
Mhm.
know the answer to that.
Okay.
Um, I can say that to make a satisfying book is something that you enjoy and that other people enjoy. That's really it. You can make, if you're able to make a living off of doing what you like to do, as they always say, you don't work a day in your life. So to make a successful comic book, successful to who? Successful to your peers, successful to yourself, successful to the audience. So
Hmm.
it's kind of an odd circumstances. So for myself to be a successful comic book is to be able to live off of making the comic book.
Is it necessary to go to cons and to do meet and greets in person or online?
Oh, on that scale, well, yeah, it's you have to look at it as like a consumable item.
Okay.
You can have the best thing in the world, but if no one knows about it, what good is it? Look
Got
at look at the highest grossing movies of all time. Whenever highest grossing movie of all time is highest grossing movie of all time, usually it's because of the marketing and the promotion. It doesn't necessarily have to do with how good the movie is, how enjoyable the movie was. It just means that a lot of people were selling the sizzle, not the steak, and they ran out to go see this movie, good, bad, or indifferent.
Hmm. Last two questions. We got the social media at the end, or and the final question is, in this year, 2022 to 2023, what themes do you think we're gonna see in the comic book world?
Well, right now there's this guy who's making quote unquote waves. It's the Rippaverse, Rippaverse. He's doing what's been thrown around as a non-woke comic book creator. He's a black guy and he's making his own universe out of his own money, and he's raised about $3 million.
Wow,
So
I gotta see this.
I think just being yourself, once again, just being yourself, being sincere, being the stuff, just putting it out there to make sure
Hmm.
you enjoy it,
Hmm.
and just don't try to push the message.
Hmm.
Will make the money, and that's why I think it goes. The trend is always follow the money.
Hmm.
So we had a trend about the pendulum swinging one way, and then it's swinging all the way in the other direction. I think it's going to start swinging back
Mm, okay.
for the other direction.
And the final piece is on July 30th, you come out with your Kickstarter for Designated. Now, where can people find you and find your work?
So it's itcamefromradio.com. You should listen to the show that you're listening to now. So you listen to the show, you go back and listen to it again, and therefore you're becoming meta. But it's Twitter, it would be Instagram. We don't really use Instagram. So Twitter and Facebook came from the radio. Everything's It Came from the Radio. Just Google It Came from the Radio. It's so easy. And
Mhm.
the designated will be under designated under Kickstarter. So for the next month, we end on the 30th of August. Just go to Kickstarter.com, look up designated, one word, and you'll find us.
Thank you so much, Mark. And perhaps we'll be hearing more from you on It Came From the Radio. And now back to more It Came From the Radio.